Hello everyone! Today we will be presenting security conversations with Genetec ClearID and Nationwide. So to introduce myself, my name is Giulia Bruzzese and I am the Product Marketing Specialist for ClearID. And presenting with me is Sharon Jung, the Product Manager for ClearID. So our special guest joining us today is David Queen, the Director of Corporate Security from Nationwide, an insurance and financial services company. And please feel free to leave any questions in the chat and someone will address them. So there are three main topics that you will walk away with at the end of this presentation. We'll start with discovering the ClearID solution and its different functionalities. You will get an overview of a ClearID customer, Nationwide, and their journey with implementing our solution. And finally, you will discover the different benefits of enhancing your Genetec Synergis access control system with ClearID. So let's begin. What is Genetec ClearID? Genetec ClearID is a cloud solution, and it is a smarter and more efficient way to manage physical access for employees, contractors, and visitors. So many organizations are quite comfortable with how they are managing physical access. They'll give access to their employees, adjust it due to job changes, and remove it when it's time. Assigning temporary access due to short-term needs will prompt a review to ensure access is accurate. So incorporating a visitor and contractor management process is also necessary. But in reality, many organizations, whether big, medium, or small, will use antiquated processes in many of these areas, and most of them are very manual. So this leads to bottlenecks, as it is dependent on a middleman, usually an operator, to process these tasks, and this will hold up the queue. As well, this will also increase risks, so giving more access, not enough access, and provisioning incorrect access. There is also no audit trail on why certain areas have been assigned to employees. So all of these processes are manually driven and are centralized where security takes the brunt of the administrative work. That being said, there are many opportunities to modernize these processes, and that starts with unifying both the Synergis access control system with ClearID. So how do ClearID and Synergis work together? Well, for starters, the business tools being used at your organization don't need to change, whether that's Active Directory, an HR system, or an IAM system, whatever that may be, as they contain a wealth of information. So once you connect it and sync it to ClearID, you can then automate physical access for employees by setting policies in ClearID that when conditions are met, access is granted. Access can also be requested through a self-service portal that is accessible with internet access. So this offers convenience to employees that make requests and for those who will then have to approve them. So all of these decisions about access are then synchronized to the Synergis system, and access is then reflected. Both solutions will complement each other and work together to help organizations achieve operational efficiency and reduce the risks of incorrect provisioning. Once you have connected your source of truth to ClearID, this will then populate your employees into the solution. So new identities are created, whether that's employees that are being onboarded or contractors that are being hired, and based on their attributes, like department, job titles, seniority, status, location, and more, the identity's access rights are provisioned, and credentials are then assigned. Any changes that may occur throughout their lifecycle at the organization, so moving from the Montreal to Paris office or changing department like marketing to HR, well, this will then reflect change in their access. And finally, at the end, a simple status change will revoke their access. So ClearID is therefore going to follow and automate the entire life cycle of your employees at your organization. So really, any changes that are occurring in the source of truth will propagate the changes to ClearID and then synchronize them to the Synergis access control system. So here is the ClearID self-service portal, accessible anywhere with internet connection, whether you're at home, at the office, or on the go. The portal enables employees to easily request temporary access to different areas or even different sites. This will give the employees ownership of their own areas, of their own requests, and streamlining them directly to business stakeholders to then approve them. They can also invite visitors to their organization. And finally, employees can request to add one or multiple new identities to the system, like contractors that need to come to the organization.
Thank you, Julia. And right now we're going to have our Q&A with Nationwide. And we're so pleased and excited to have Dave Queen from Nationwide with us. Nationwide is a Fortune 500 company based in Columbus, Ohio. They have over 15 sites in the United States, as well as 35,000 employees, and that includes their contractors. And they've been a Genetec customer for many years now. They started with the Omnicast video monitoring. They recently migrated to Synergis and are also a ClearID customer. So welcome, Dave. We're so happy to have you here to share your story. There are so many customers out there who are in your shoes right now or who are considering to migrate to Synergis, and I think that this conversation with you to talk about the Nationwide journey is going to help a lot of people gain the confidence to move to the Genetec Security Center solution. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about our journey.
Absolutely. What I really want to focus on is really the access control migration from your legacy system to Synergis, and also how you implemented ClearID and were able to modernize the management of cardholders and Nationwide. Would you be able to describe a little bit about the planning and implementation of the access control migration at Nationwide?
Yeah, so one of the biggest issues for us was the fact that we had three disparate access systems at our large owned and leased properties. And each one of these had a different card, and we wanted to consolidate into one source of truth, one access control system for all of them. So we worked with our IT partners and we developed a plan that involved determining what sites we did first. And then we decided to review our data to make sure that our data was good. So we were importing all data into the systems. And then we started the conversion.
Okay, so having a lot of data because you had three different disparate access control systems, you had to do a bit of data scrubbing. So I guess that really required your stakeholders to come together to identify what was needed and what was no longer required as you migrated, correct?
That is correct. Over the years with different people entering, different people having different retention periods of how much time they would keep information in the access control systems. It was really good in proper due diligence to go through the data so that we made sure that the data that we were importing was good to start with.
So is that at which point once you migrated your cardholders to Synergis, is that when you connected ClearID?
We first connected to ClearID by connecting the identities first. After we connected to the identities first, that allowed us to build out our sites, areas, identity templates, and roles.
So once you built out all your entities, that's really how it built out your infrastructure in the Synergis access control. I mean, if we recall the slide about how there's that interaction, ClearID being the cloud solution, is basically synchronizing all of those information entities and requests, all of that into Synergis. Once you built out the infrastructure, what was the next step?
From there, we went ahead and leveraged provisioning policies to give all of our card holders general access. Once we gave all the card holders general access, then we began adding the identities to the respective areas.
Perfect. I think that the fact that you've connected Synergis to ClearID, that's really where it opened up a whole new set of features available to you. And as you mentioned, there was the attribute-based provisioning policies, which I think the way you're describing it, you use it on a more broader level, where the physical provisioning was for general access. And I think just to give a bit of context for those who are listening, the provisioning policies features is really what allows you to create policies. And if those employees meet the conditions of those policies, they will automatically be part of roles that give them the access. And a big part of that is about relying on what we know about the employees, their attributes, what department they're from, what job title they have, and other information, much like what Julia mentioned in that slide about the life cycle of the employee. And it really allows the administrators to be less involved and rely on policies. And I think what you're describing, Dave, is the provisioning of the access for general access. And were you able to get more policies in there that got more detailed and more granular? And if so, or if not, can you describe what was your reasoning behind how you've set up the policies?
Well, one of the ways that we did it was through another data source. We created a building access yes. So that flag would come through, and if that building access yes, that would translate to a provisioning policy that would give contractors general access and also speak to ID card issuance for contractors, because not all contractors get ID cards. Secondly, we used provisioning policies for more specific areas where there was a clear line of leadership. So specifically in security, each security supervisor was added as a provisioning policy, and then it gave additional layers of access to the officers that reported to them.
I think it's really good that you're describing the way that you're using your provisioning policies, because that may differ from one organization to another. So hearing that you've set it up in a much broader sense, you use supervisors, you had certain aspects of how you set it up, which means that you've used it to what fits your business. And there are other organizations that go a lot more granular, and that's the reason why is because it fits their business. So some of them go through policies where it takes into a job title, the department, a primary site, even like a worker type code. And based on that, it gives them role membership that gives them access. I think it gives an important look at the features that we have available, and that it doesn't need to be used one certain way, and it can be leveraged to be used in certain different ways depending on the business. And I think at the end of the day, it's really to be able to help the business be more operationally efficient. So I'm glad to hear that the way that you've set it up at your organization has helped you. If we look at some of those synchronizations about those cardholder groups, when we talk about the provisioning policies that automatically give access, and it does so in a way that it puts the people into the right roles that give them the access. And if we look at Nationwide and what that has meant for Nationwide as far as the number of cardholder groups that you have today, how does that look in contrast to what you used to have?
It was a big reduction in the overall number of cardholder groups that we had by leveraging the role-based access. So from internally, from a security perspective, with all of this stuff being in, everything from ClearID, is seen in security desks. So, if somebody had an issue with access, they could see that cardholder group, and being fewer cardholder groups, it made it much easier for officers to understand what they were looking at.
Yes, you bring up a good point, and I do want to emphasize that the fact that the roles in ClearID will mean that they're created as cardholder groups in Synergis. So if you don't mind me asking, how many cardholder groups did you have if we look at your legacy system?
It was close to 400.
Okay.
And that was part of the data scrubbing too, making sure that we pared down those cardholder groups. And some of that was, due to the legacy nature of where a cardholder group was signed directly to an access rule. We didn't have to do that with Synergis.
So from 400 cardholder groups, how many are you down to today?
I would say approximately 80.
Okay. So it sounds like you were able to really pare things down and being able to now, for an administrator, if they do have to manually manage some access, they're working with a lot less cardholder groups, which I think does make things simpler.
It does.
Good. As to emphasize on the ClearID product and the type of features we have, there is a ClearID portal that allows users to log in and perform certain operations. And one of them is access requests. I'll go through a couple of features we have, but the access request is really when an employee needs to request access to an area or another site temporarily that's outside of their day-to-day access. And this is something that can be done through the portal. And if we look at Nationwide's usage over the last 3 months, Nationwide has made about 330 access requests. And if we look at maybe some of those scenarios which would require them to need this operation, I mean, Dave, we talked about automatic provisioning, which gives them general access. But can you describe why there has been about 330 access requests in the last couple of months at Nationwide?
We utilize a lot of access control internally to our facilities, and a lot of those access requests are changes when new people come into a department and then they need access to that area. A lot of the other requests are due to construction, and there's construction that needs to take place in that area. So all of that stuff is also handled through access requests. So that's predominantly how we utilize the access request feature of ClearID. And what people need to understand is when you said, I believe you said 330 times in the last couple months, so that would have been 330 separate emails that a employee of mine would have had to have processed in that ID center in putting that access on an individual's card. With ClearID, that's all bypassed and it's all handled within the system. So once the access is approved, the request is approved, it automatically appears on the person's card and they have access.
I think what you brought up is also something that I'd like to mention as far as it goes through the portal, and it's something that is not going to have to require your admin to manually process. And I think what's also great about the part that allows that portal to input information is that it's designed in a specific way for those requesters to have to input the necessary information, the required information, to be able to get what they want. When we talk about those email requests that you had in the past and other antiquated process that I've heard other organizations use, oftentimes there's a lot of back and forth because they've requested something, but they didn't provide all the details about it. They didn't provide an approver or any other type of information that would require that to go through automatically, or at least without any type of back and forth from the administrator to that requester. So making certain fields available and mandatory to enter allows this to be more streamlined. There's no back and forth, there's no time loss, there's no need to interrupt many people. I think that if we look at another request that you've utilized a lot at Nationwide, and that would be the identity requests. I'll just give a quick summary of what that is, but I think that hearing how Nationwide uses it would clarify this feature a lot more and be able to inform us of why that has been so valuable and so used at Nationwide. So the identity request is really a feature in the portal where someone is able to request to add an identity. And by adding this identity, typically this is somebody that's not part of a data source, so they're not synchronized from a data source because they're typically a contractor or they might be a tenant. And once requested through the portal and approved, they're going to be created as an identity and then as a cardholder in Synergis, meaning that they're also going to get the access that they require because of how they've been requested. It was requested through a specific template. Maybe it's a cleaner's template or something specific that would grant them that access. And if we look at how many have been requested at Nationwide, 980 over the last 3 months, It's interesting to hear, and if you can just shed some light about why there's been so many identity requests at Nationwide, and how has that changed operations for you?
As you suggested, there's people that do not come in through a standard feed of a data source. So in our case, it is folks that work in the cafeteria, janitorial services, contractors. We also have a significant amount of tenants. So we utilize the identity requests to also route. It also gives the people that are responsible for bringing these people in the leverage of, do they want to approve the requests, or do they want the request to be automatically approved? So that's how we utilize the identity requests. And the other benefit is too, when a person shows up at our facility, we also know that they're supposed to be there, because that identity request, once approved, it goes through to Synergist, and that's seen as an active identity in our access control system. So our security can then clear them through and get them to the ID center to get an ID made.
Perfect. I think that if we talk about the badge issuance, so we spoke about once they've been added as an identity, then they'll come into the badge office. And because they are already created in security desk, it does allow that to require less back and forth, and administrators typically have all the information that they would need when the contractor shows up.
That is correct. We've also created a QR code if they were to, as we have, we're still pretty new in our use of ClearID, and people can come to the ID center and they can actually utilize their phones. We have them shoot a QR code. It takes them to the website. They utilize their phone to then create that identity request right there on the spot.
With the QR code, I think that brings up also a number that I saw you guys using the visit requests quite often. I think there's been over 2,500 visit requests within the last 3 months. So it seems that Nationwide does invite a lot of people to their offices, customers, vendors, I assume. And has that changed from before implementing ClearID? So what was really the difference since using the visitor management module from ClearID at Nationwide?
Well, one of the things we'll probably talk about a little bit later is unification. And, we utilize Synergist for access control. We utilize Genetec Omnicast for our video management. We have a couple other plugins as well. But visitor management also used to be a separate system. So it's much, we eliminated assets. We had laptops that were dedicated to a different access control management. It was a different process for the officers to learn. It was something different that they had to look in. So, we were able to unify that within security desk and, under the visitor management task, so officers could see information about the visit, special instructions, if there was any sort of alerts or warnings from the watch list, that was in there as well. But yeah, visitor management is very popular. We utilize the kiosks with the QR code to check in. It's streamlined the lobby process. We've gotten very, very positive feedback from other companies about how smooth the check-in process goes.
Great. I'm glad that it has been streamlining the process and probably less bottleneck at reception for you. There is a feature within ClearID called access reviews. So just to give a bit of context about that, this is when an admin or a site owner schedules an access review, and then these will result in reviews automatically being generated at a regular cadence. And then those approvers will be the ones verifying it to verify correctness of area access or correctness of role membership, amongst other things. And throughout the last 3 months at Nationwide, there's been about 50 access requests or access reviews rather generated. And in terms of how that plays into your auditing process and your revision process, how does that change things at Nationwide, and what type of access reviews are these?
So we divide all of our access control areas into three risk categories: low, medium, and high. And I won't go into the detail on that, but a low risk site is a site where you just want accountability of who's going in or out. A medium risk site might be an area where there's access that requires, like for a gym, we require certain waivers for a gym, and those waivers have to be reviewed periodically and kept up to date. And then our high risk areas are like executive floors, and we have a trading floor in one of our buildings. So um, we basically utilize the access review and schedule those on our cadence for each of those risk levels. So our low is an annual review, our mediums is a quarterly, and then our high risk is a monthly review.
So these reviews come at different times depending on the severity level, the risk level, I guess, associated to those areas. I think that it is interesting with audit periods. I mean, in your case, it does span over the course of a year. There are some audit periods in general that just comes around and it gets very busy. The administrators are really bogged down with so many other things that they're working on. And we've heard with a lot of customer discussions that oftentimes, because it takes so much time to prepare these reviews and to gather the information from different systems, it falls through the cracks, and it often doesn't get done, or it gets done but it's a little bit delayed, right, because of the procrastination or just how difficult it can be. And I think that sometimes that comes with some repercussions, maybe just a slap on the wrist that this should have been done. But at times, if there are incidents, if there are things related to a breach of access and the review was just never done, I think that's when it can get more serious. It can tarnish a reputation, or it can cause other issues. So I think that facilitating the access reviews, having that automated, and also, like Nationwide has been able to segregate what's severity levels, so some of them that is less severe will have less of a review, and be able to kind of pare down and segregate that. So if we talk about the review process, it doesn't have to be so time consuming, it doesn't need to be so laborious. And I think what I want to call out is in terms of the access reviews in ClearID, when your reviewers perform the audit, it does then synchronize automatically to Synergist. So that means your administrator has less of that manual process.
Absolutely, 100%. As they go through the access reviews and people have left those areas, if an area owner didn't go in and remove them on their own, that's their opportunity to go and look at that, and they can remove those identities from the areas from the access review, and that automatically syncs down to Synergist, and that access is removed immediately from the card.
We just spoke about a lot of different requests and some different processes that have been put into place. The access requests, identity requests, visit events being created through ClearID, and now the access review. And I think that a lot of interest will come in with regards to how you've been able to get so many of your employees to adopt to this new process. The numbers are, show itself as to the number of employees actually logging in and making these requests. Did you have a program in place? And can you describe a little bit about how you were able to do this?
So fortunately, training from our department, I've got a fabulous trainer. And so we worked on a good training plan of how we were going to roll this out. I also have a very good corporate communications staff that I worked with, and we determined who we needed to communicate, which group of people. So we needed a general communication that, hey, we're transitioning to a product called ClearID. It's an identity and access management. It'll also change the way of how we issue ID cards and how we handle access within the company. So that kind of went out to everybody. And then we did targeted training with area approvers. And obviously we did some training internally, because this site managers, for example, are basically security staff. So we trained our security staff in ClearID, and then we focused on area approvers And then we focused on those that would manage identities, those that would be putting in access requests. So, and we also work with our SMS partners that had contractors that came in through work, through our HR database sources. So they were aware of how ClearID works. So basically a good training plan, very targeted and very specific, with good sessions catered to each task. So whether that was an area approver, whether that was somebody did identity request, or if that was somebody that did visitor management. That's how we rolled it out.
That's very interesting. So communication, targeted users, training, and I think that overall what you've managed to do at Nationwide is really be able to get everyone to buy in and use the product. So I think that's really commendable with the program that you put together for that training. We've spoken a little bit about this when you touched upon the visit requests and how it does create those visitors in Synergis. And this is really about how Genetec as a whole is really focused on unification. Unification is at the core of our development focus. And Nationwide has a number of products today, a lot of Genetec products with the video monitoring, access control, and ClearID. And I think you mentioned a couple of others. And what we want to hear about is really how you've been able to experience that unification and how that has helped your organization.
So the key way is, as I suggested with our security staff, and now they have one place to go to for everything. There used to be a place to go for access control. There used to be a different place to go to, and a different asset 9 times out of 10. So there would be another PC that would be needed for your video management software. And again, from there, as we suggested, visitors. It makes training much easier for security officers if you keep them all in one place and a place that they're very familiar with.
Perfect. I think that having that single pane of glass is something that allows you to just monitor everything that has to do with security in one place, and that brings everything together. And I think that it's starting off with one product, and it led you to utilize many more others at Genetec. And I think that with that, I really want to thank you for your time and for all the insight you provided. There's a lot of nuggets of wisdom that you provided for those customers who are in your shoes right now, who are looking to migrate and to move to Security Center and to ClearID. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And I hope everyone really benefited from all of this discussion about how Nationwide has utilized our Genetec ClearID and our Genetec products as a whole.
Well, and I'd like to thank you too, Sharon. And one thing that's gone unsaid in this discussion is that working with the Genetec team was an extremely crucial aspect of, one, selecting Genetec in general and Synergis in the early days of looking for a product to replace 3 disparate systems, and 2, you and your colleagues that we worked with in implementing ClearID. It really made the process fun, and it made it really easy to execute. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much, Sharon, and thank you again, David. That was such an insightful Q&A. So before we conclude, I'd like to reemphasize really on how ClearID enhances the Synergis access control system and how you can benefit from this unification. So firstly, through data-driven automation, ClearID will automate the provisioning and deprovisioning of employees. So your administrator doesn't need to always make manual updates and changes within the system. Everything is done through the provisioning aspect and through the provisioning policies that an administrator would create through ClearID. So really, the entire life cycle of your employees will be automated, from onboarding to job changes and then through offboarding. Secondly, ClearID is a self-service portal. It's a web solution that is available enterprise-wide. So everyone from your organization can have access to log in, to perform their own access requests, to invite visitors, to add contractors to the system, and then giving the power to the approvers to approve or review any requests that will come in. So paper forms, emails, and waiting around isn't needed anymore. Really, all individuals are accountable for any decisions and actions that are made, ensuring auditability within the Synergis access control system. And finally, you can benefit by centralizing all systems through this web portal to manage physical access rights for one or many Synergis systems. So to summarize today's presentation, ClearID ensures that you can automate provisioning and deprovisioning, eliminating the need for the administrator to manually make changes to the lifecycle of your employees. You can easily request access to secure areas, invite visitors, and add contractors to your system through the self-service portal, accessible really for all employees. You can then maintain the integrity of your access control system with regularly scheduled access reviews for all your areas. You can, of course, standardize and enforce your corporate and security policies, and finally get tracking and reports for every operation that is performed with an identity. So on one final note, ClearID is a smarter way to manage physical access, and the combination of both Synergis and ClearID really create one complete solution. So thank you all for watching and attending our session today, and thank you to David Queen for making the time out of his day to speak about the implementation of ClearID at Nationwide. So scanning the QR code on your screen will direct you to the ClearID webpage where you can request a demo and browse our other resources. Have a great rest of your day.